Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. On behalf of Vivekananda Study Circle, I extend a warm welcome to the guest Revered Swami Atmarupanandaji, professors, students, residents of the campus, Swamijis and Brahmacharis of the Ramakrishna Math to our special lecture, Are Swami Vivekananda's Ideas Really Universal? I request everyone to kindly silence their mobiles. Thank you. Now I request Dharmesh and Sanjay to start, our volunteers Dharmesh and Sanjay to start the program with an invocation. I request everyone to stand up for the invocation.
Sahana bhavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahe, tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Asato ma Sadgamaya, Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamaya.
I request the guest of the evening, Revered Swami Atmarupanandaji, the faculty advisor of VSc, Professor C. Balaji, and the spiritual mentor of VSc, Revered Swami Atmashraddhanandaji, to offer flowers to Swami Vivekananda. Now I request Revered Swami Atmarupanandaji to kindly grace the dais. I request our volunteer Shireen to present a fruit basket to Swamiji. Swami Atmarupanandaji is a renowned monk and scholar of Ramakrishna Math. He joined the monastic order in 1969 and has spent years in India, and later at the Vedanta Society at Hollywood in USA, engaged in monastic, scholarly and spiritual training. He combines a contemplative and mystical approach with an extraordinary scholarly training and a good sense of humor that are helpful in explaining subtle concepts of Vedanta to students. He has spoken at several national and international conferences and meetings on Vedanta in the light of teachings of Swami Vivekananda. He has written numerous thought-provoking articles on spirituality and self-development. Without any further delay, I request Swami Atmarupanandaji to address the gathering.
Thank you. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Friends, I'm very pleased to be here. It's a great honor to be asked to come to this wonderful institution. I know it's very difficult to get into, and all I had to do was to get in the car and be driven here, so it was very easy for me, difficult for you. But then, of course, I'm not studying here, I'm just asked to give a talk. When hearing an introduction of myself, as just now was so well given, I always have the feeling, who is he talking about? That's not me. But anyway, I'm very glad to be here. I'm very glad to be with the Vivekananda Study Circle. So glad to be at IIT-Madras or IIT Chennai, and glad to be with the Vivekananda Study Circle in particular. A senior Swami who long ago passed away, Swami Hiranmayanandaji Maharaj, he told me that when he was a young man and coming to the Advaita Ashrama in Calcutta, he became close to a great Swami of ours known as Swami Ashokananda. And Swami Ashokananda asked him, "Do you love Swamiji?" He said, "I don't believe in any love which is not love at first sight." And Swami Hiranmayanandaji told me that I was so delighted because I may not have other qualifications, but I knew that yes, it was love at first sight when I encountered Swamiji. And so that's the same with me. I don't have any other qualifications, but when I first read about Swami Vivekananda, when I first opened the first biography about Swami Vivekananda, I was so delighted. I knew that I had found my life's hero. And that was 46 years ago now. So I've been a member of the order for 46 years. And strangely, I came to the Ramakrishna movement not knowing about Swami Vivekananda. I knew about Sri Ramakrishna a little bit, Vedanta philosophy a little bit, and liked both of them. But it was after coming to join the order that I learned about Swami Vivekananda. But again, the first night I was in the ashrama, someone gave me his biography, and when I opened it and began to read, then that was the beginning of a lifelong love affair with Swami Vivekananda. So again, it's a delight to be here. Anyone who has any level of interest in Swami Vivekananda, I'm delighted to meet. Before I begin the actual topic, which is, are Swami Vivekananda's ideas really universal? I just want to say a few words in address to you students who are here. Recently, don't need to say where, but recently I was at a youth conference, and I was so shocked. There were many very good students there, college students, many very good students, some that I met and talked to, some very good ones. But I was really shocked to find the general level of understanding and interest of the people. I found that the speakers, those who were used to audiences like that, they had to spend their whole time speaking, jumping and shouting and gesticulating and telling constant jokes just to hold people's attention. That's a very sad commentary on the state of education today. Coming here to IIT, I know that the standard here is very high. And though I know how to make a PowerPoint presentation and multimedia things, I don't do it for the reason that we shouldn't lose the ability to focus the mind, to follow a train of thought, to take up an idea, or to listen to someone else who is following a thread of thought, and to follow that thread of thought. We shouldn't get to the point where we have to be entertained all of the time. That's a very, very sad thing. You are the children, the sons and daughters of the rishis, the great rishis of the Upanishads and the Vedas, the children of the great sages through the long tradition of Indian civilization. Whether you are Hindu or Christian or Muslim, whether you are religious or non-religious, doesn't matter. You are the children of great, great sages. And so we should never lose that ability to focus the mind, to follow a train of thought, to pursue a train of thought. So don't lose that. I was so disheartened to see that unless one told constant jokes, unless one had jumped up and down and got everyone to say, yes, 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 and everybody doing that, then you couldn't hold people's attention. That was a very sad commentary on the present state. And I'm not speaking just about India. This was in India, but it's true around the world. And so don't lose that. You are the cream of Indian young intellectual society, the cream of the youth of India intellectually. And so don't forget your heritage. Don't forget the ability, don't lose the ability to follow a train of thought, to be able to concentrate. Don't fall into the 5-minute attention span. Don't fall into the need for constant entertainment. In America, where I come from, as you know, there are some of our people who say, no, we have to adjust to the 5-minute attention span. We have to learn to present things to people who can't concentrate for more than 5 minutes. No, we can't do that. We may need to do that to reach some people. Yes, we should be able to reach everyone. We should be able to reach everyone. But higher life, higher mental life, higher cultural life is impossible without the ability to sustain a train of thought. And so that we should never lose. And so I purposefully don't use PowerPoints. I don't use multimedia in presentations because I don't want to support again, there's nothing wrong with it, objectively, there's nothing wrong with it. And many of our Swamis use it, and that's very good. So I'm not criticizing the use of it. I don't use it. It's a personal choice of mine because I don't want to support that need for entertainment. If I have something to say, then I want to present that and have people follow it because of the strength of the ideas. And if I don't have something to say, then there's no sense in listening anyway. So no sense even in having a presentation, multimedia presentation, if there's nothing to say. So, to the topic. I was trying to orient myself to see if there was a clock that would let me know when I was going overtime. So, are the ideas of Swami Vivekananda really universal? Tomorrow I'm going to speak on the search for the self. That will be a more directly spiritual topic. Today it's indirectly spiritual. It is spiritual. Anything touching Swami Vivekananda is spiritual, but today it's a more general talk. As you heard in the introduction, I've traveled a lot internationally. And I've been a couple of times to Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I've been to many Muslim countries in the Middle East. Recently I was in Iran. I was invited to Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Egypt, etc. And when I went to Abu Dhabi, to Abu Dhabi, I was told, Maharaj, you're going to have a public speech, but please you speak on the topic of Swami Vivekananda's ideas for the future of humankind. But don't speak about religion. And I thought, my goodness, how can I do that? How can you speak about Swami Vivekananda without mentioning religion? How can you do that? Everything about Swamiji was religious. Everything was not religious in the conventional sense, not going to temples and making pranam, though he had nothing against that. But everything about Swamiji, you could say, was spiritual. One of the great things about the Swami was whatever topic he addressed, whatever topic he took interest in, whatever topic he spoke formally or informally about, he saw the connection to ultimate reality. Whether he was speaking about history, whether he was speaking about science, whether he was speaking about art, or, of course, religion, he had the ability to see the connection between every aspect of human life and spirituality. And so you can't speak about Swami Vivekananda without speaking about spirituality. I finally understood in Abu Dhabi that they just didn't want me to speak about ordinary religious terms. The spiritual terms were okay, but that, of course, is very easy with Swami Vivekananda. But you can't speak about him without touching the infinite, because Swami Vivekananda was rooted in the infinite, consciously rooted in the infinite. All of us are rooted in the infinite also, but we don't know it. That's our problem. That's why we have to follow spiritual disciplines. But Swami Vivekananda was consciously rooted in the infinite. And so everything that he touched that. So, are Swami Vivekananda's ideas really universal? I came up with the topic because we make claims that Swami Vivekananda's ideas are universal. And I'm sure that all of you figured when you saw the title that, of course, Swami is going to speak and going to tell us that his ideas are universal. And yes, that's true. But sometimes we have to ask fundamental questions. Because we say his ideas are universal, that doesn't make them universal. So we have to justify it. And especially nowadays, because there are people who say that his ideas are not universal. There are those who say that Swami Vivekananda was part of the colonized mind in India. There are those, there's a whole school of thought at Jawaharlal Nehru University and other places also, but that's sort of one of the centers of it, where they say that Swami Vivekananda represents the colonized mind. They make the very strange claim that Mahatma Gandhiji was the indigenous mind and Swami Vivekananda was the colonized mind. That's a very strange thing. And in what I'm going to say now, addressing that, I have no criticism for Gandhiji. I'm a great admirer of Gandhiji, so criticism is not of him, but of that idea, and of saying how they could say that Gandhiji represents the indigenous mind and Swami Vivekananda the colonized mind, the mind colonized by the West. They say that even the pictures of Swami Vivekananda where he stands like this shows that he was the colonized mind. That's a Western way of standing. That's an aggressive pose, whereas Gandhiji was humble and the passive, humble, peaceful, ahimsa type, which is the indigenous mind. Where did they get such foolish ideas? Have they never read the Mahabharata? Have they never read the Ramayana? Have they never read their own literature? And again, no criticism to Gandhiji. He was a great man who I myself have great reverence for and have studied. But Gandhiji got his inspiration where? From the Sermon on the Mount, from Leo Tolstoy, from Henry David Thoreau. And his idea of satyagraha, he took from the idea of soul power, and this is all well documented, it's not speculation, from an American thinker of the 19th century who developed the idea of soul power, and Gandhiji read about that when he was inspired and wanted an indigenous idea, so he made the term satyagraha. So Gandhiji, who took his inspiration from these sources, he is the indigenous mind, and Swami Vivekananda, who took his inspiration from the Upanishads, is the colonized mind. Where people get such foolish ideas, I don't know. But anyway, now there are those who say that Swami Vivekananda is not at all universal. His ideas are not universal. He was a Hindu. So right there's a problem. He was a Hindu. He was a male. He wasn't a woman. So that also, he had only the male perspective. He had only the Hindu perspective. He was an Indian, a patriotic Indian. So how could he be universal? He was a member of a certain caste. How he didn't have the experience of the low castes or of the uncasted. And he belonged to the late 19th century. And so he belonged to a particular period of history. So how can you say Swami Vivekananda's ideas are universal? How can you claim him to be a universal man? Well, if such criticisms are true, universality is impossible for everyone. Because at least last time I checked, all of us were born at a particular point in time. We weren't born in universal time, we were born in a particular point in time. And last time I checked, all of us were born in a particular country. And last time I checked, all of us were born either male or female. So if that criticism is true, then universality itself is impossible. But the human heart has a strong desire, especially nowadays, a strong desire for universality. We're not satisfied to keep ourselves in small boxes, especially today. You see the huge change that's come about in India. I first came to India in 1971 as a young brahmachari of the order. At that time and now, 2015, what huge changes in India, huge changes. At that time, people in the villages knew very little outside of their village. I traveled in India at that time in 71. I met people in villages, places like the birthplaces of Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother in Jairambati, Kamarpukur. They were remote villages, and people had little contact with the outside world. and I met villagers in other parts of India as well. Very isolated, didn't know much outside of their village. Now I go to a place like Mayavati in Uttarakhand, in what used to be the remote Himalayas. It's still fairly remote. And a villager from a tiny little village this villager I've known for many years because I lived at Mayavati for many years. He had very little education. But on walking with him through the mountains there at Mayavati a couple of years ago, he brought up the topic of climate change and was talking to me about climate change. Even in America, unfortunately, there are many people in America who don't even believe in climate change. Many people in America who don't even believe in evolution. And yet here, the simple Indian villager with hardly any education, he's talking to me about climate change. And he's almost never been out of his little village. So things have changed. People here in India and people in the rest of the world, they want to be universal. They don't want to be restricted to a particular viewpoint. And Swami Vivekananda, of all people, had an extraordinarily large viewpoint. And he showed us that universality is possible. It's possible to be a universal person. Yes, this body may be male, in the case of myself, and in the case of Swami Vivekananda, but a Vivekananda can rise above even the limitations of rise above in his consciousness, above the limitations of his body, the limitations of his birth, and identify with humanity itself. And that's what the Swami did. And that's why when we read the Swami, whether male or female, whether Indian or Western, whether someone in the 19th century or 20th or 21st century, we feel an identity with him. We feel a connection with him because of that universality. So sometimes when we make claims of universality, we say that, well, my tradition is a universal tradition. What I mean is, I think everybody should believe as I do. I follow this path, and it's a universal path. What I actually mean is, it's good for me, and I think everybody else should follow the same path. Swami Vivekananda's universality was not like that. I may be, and it's one of the great faults of Western civilization, which I think it's best to be quite honest about. One of the great faults which you have seen plenty of, and the rest of the world has seen plenty of also. But even now in the West, it's rarely recognized. And that is, the West thinks everyone should be like them. The West thinks that we are civilization, and the rest of the world should adapt to us, and the rest of the world should be like us. The rest of the world should dress like us. The rest of the world should speak like us. The rest of the world should eat like us. The rest of the world should think like us. And so in the West, that idea is very prevalent even now. Not among everyone, but still it's unfortunately too strong. The idea that universality means the rest of the world should be like the West. Everybody should take up a Western culture because that's universal culture. Why universal? Because we like it and we think everyone else should follow it. But no, that's not universality, and that's not the universality which Swami Vivekananda taught. Sometimes we think that, or we say that something is universal because we think it's the best for the modern age. And that sometimes, yes, that sometimes we say even of Swami Vivekananda, of Sri Ramakrishna, we say that their ideas were suited for the modern age. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any criticism of that. They came at a time when the modern age, what we know now as the modern age, the 20th and 21st century, were just being created. And they addressed the problems that now have become so large in our own view. But even that is not what I mean by the universal ideas of Swami Vivekananda. Not that he was just a representative of the modern age and therefore he has something to say to us. Yes, that's true. He did speak to the modern age, but what he said was larger than just the modern age. And so it's that I want to address today. So what do we mean by universal? In general, by universal, we mean it's true for everyone, everywhere, at all times. If something is truly universal, it's true for everyone, everywhere, at all times. Now, yes, Swami Vivekananda often addressed specific historical situations. He addressed specific nations like India or America or England or France, etc. But much of what he said was universal in this sense, and that's what I want to develop. True for everyone, everywhere, at all times. That's what real universality means. We have the example, and you are experts in this much more than myself. We have the example of modern science. The example of modern science. Newton discovered gravity. He didn't discover gravity. He discovered the principle of the mathematical relationship between bodies with mass. He discovered the principle of gravitation. Newton was a man of a particular century. He belonged to a particular country. He was male, not female, etc. But gravitation is not limited by those qualities of his discovery. Gravitation works in India as it works in England. Gravitation works in South Africa as it works in Antarctica. Gravitation works on Earth as it works on the Moon, as it works on Mars, as it works on Jupiter, and other places in the universe. So gravitation is a universal principle discovered by Newton. It's not something which is culturally defined, culturally limited, not limited by the facts of Newton's own biography. It's a universal principle. So that's a good example of the principles which Swami Vivekananda taught. And again, I want to make it clear that yes, there were times when he addressed particular people, particular countries, particular cultures, particular times, etc. But in the background, he never lost this universal view of the universal principles, the way that the universe works. Another feature of universality is that a universal principle, a universal teaching, is not in the form of a story. You may use a story to illustrate it. For instance, in religions around the world, there are stories about the creation of the world, that a particular idea of a particular deity, whether it's God or Allah or Prajapati or whatever the particular religion calls God, how God created the universe, and the various stories about how God created the universe. Those stories are beautiful, the stories are meaningful, and they're sacred to different traditions, so I have nothing to say against them. But that is not a universal principle. A universal principle is that which is true for everyone, everywhere. So a universal principle is not told in the form of a story. It's not told in the form of a story, and therefore it's not mythology. Mythology also is very beautiful. Hinduism has more mythology than any country, any religion in the world. All religions are mythological. Even those who claim to be non-mythological, they're clearly mythological. So myth doesn't mean untrue. It doesn't mean made up out of the lower parts of the human mind. It means truth told in the form of stories. Truth told in the form of stories. That's mythology. But mythology is not universal. Mythology can tell great truths, as poetry can, but it's not universal. Ritual is not universal. All religions have ritual. Hinduism as well as and Hinduism has probably more ritual than any religion also, more mythology than any religion. But universal truths are neither limited to mythological expression, they're not limited to stories, nor are they limited to a particular ritual expression, a ritual way of performing. A universal principle is not a unique revelation. That is, as in science, if I come to you and say that I have discovered something, some new physical, new principle in physics or biology or whatever, then you ask, well, how did you do it? And I tell you how I did it. And then you say, well, let me see if I can replicate it. And I say, no, you can't replicate it. I discovered it. I discovered it, and it only happened one time. You can't repeat it. Well, then you know that that's not a scientific principle. So science means that everything must be replicable. You must be able to repeat it. You must be able to do the same experiment and come up with the same results. If you don't, you know there's something wrong with the first experiment, or it's an anomaly. So not a unique revelation. And a universal principle is not made, not invented, but it's discovered. Before Newton was born, there was gravity. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here. We would have floated off into space long ago. So there's gravity long before Newton was born. He didn't invent gravity. He didn't make up the principle of gravity and say, okay, I've made a new law. My new law is the law of gravitation, and everyone must follow it. If you don't follow the law of gravity, you will be punished. No, he discovered the principle of gravitation. It was something which existed for all time. And so all of these elements are parts of a universal principle. Paul Deussen, the great German Indologist that Swami Vivekananda met, he lived in the 19th and into the 20th century. One of the great early German Sanskritologists, Indologists. He said that India was the first place in the world which went beyond the mythological mind. In the Upanishads, the Indian mind was the first in the world to go beyond the mythological mind. What does that mean? It means that in India, first of all countries in the world, there were great men and women who were interested in principles. They didn't ask questions in the Upanishads like, who made this universe and how did they make it and where do they live? They didn't ask questions about stories. They didn't make up stories. They asked questions like, Kasminu bhagavo vijñate sarvamidam vijñatam bhavatiti. In the Mundaka Upanishad. What is that, O Lord? What is that, O revered sir? By knowing which everything here becomes known. Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha. By whom directed does this mind think of the things it thinks? It asked, who is that who is behind the mind? Whose purpose is the mind serving? What is that by knowing which everything here becomes known? What is consciousness? What is life itself? What is existence itself? Those are not mythological questions. Those are not who made this world and how did they make it and who is he married to and how many children do they have, the gods and goddesses, and so forth. No, it was asking for principles. What are the principles on which this universe is built? What is consciousness itself? What is being itself? What is existence itself? So those are the sort of questions. So Paul Deussen said that here in India, in the Upanishads, was the place where first the human mind went beyond the mythological mind. And you may be surprised to know, I've traveled a lot around the world, many countries, and been to many interreligious conferences. I have dialogued with many great representatives of other religious traditions, that in most religious traditions, the thinking is still mythological. In India, after the time of the Upanishads, there was the flowering of the Puranic period, the Puranas, the Itihasas, etc., and then the Tantras. And so at that time, there was a growth of new mythology. The Vedic mythology subsided, and then there was the Upanishads with this insight into principles beyond the mythological mind, and then mythology proliferated in India. But because of that Upanishadic period, something tremendous happened in India. And I'm talking about going beyond story, but let me illustrate it by a story, by an actual anecdote. Once someone asked me, a Christian asked me, do you in Hinduism have any myth like our myth of the 6 days of creation, God creating the world in 6 days? And I said, there are many myths of creation in Hinduism. Which one do you want? You have the universe is the dance of the Divine Mother, the dance of the mad dance of Ma Kali. The universe is the dance of Shiva. Shiva goes into meditation, the universe disappears, and Shiva begins to dance, and the universe comes into being. Prajapati said, Ekoham bahusyam prajayeya. I am one. I want to become many, so let me body myself forth. And any number of different stories of how creation came to be. Which one do you want? But you see what happened, because of that proliferation of mythology, it relativizes all mythology. It means that all of them are illustrating something beyond themselves. You can't say that No, this universe is not the dance of Shiva, it's the dance of Kali, and only the dance of Kali. No, Prajapati didn't say that. It's the dance of Kali, only the dance of Kali. No. One way of looking at it is the dance of Kali, another is the dance of Shiva, another is Prajapati wanting to become many, and the many other stories of creation. And so with everything in Hindu mythology, that you have so many stories to explain everything, that it relativizes all of the explanations. So all of the explanations become story, not an attempt at history, but they become illustrations, they become analogies, they become upama. So the Indian mind went beyond mythology, and then when mythology came back, it came back with such an abundance that there was still, at least among the educated, spiritually and religiously educated people, the idea that behind all of the stories there are principles, because those had been enunciated in the Upanishads. By the time Swami Vivekananda came, that was being forgotten by many. And so one of the great things Swamiji did was to draw the principles out of the Upanishads and make them visible and say, this is your Vedanta. This is your Vedanta, which is the basis of Hinduism. So to be a principle, we need all of these things. It should be something which is universal, not limited by time, not limited by country, not limited by anything, but something which is a principle which is true because it's true objectively, something which is discovered. And so those are the sort of principles that Swami Vivekananda developed. They're laws of physical nature, as I said, and that's what science, modern science deals with, the laws of physical nature, whether physics, chemistry, biology, geology, etc., the different sciences. There's the laws of the mind, which modern psychology has taken up, trying to learn the laws of the mind. That's an area where India is still far, far ahead of modern science. Not that modern science has nothing to say, no. There have been many great discoveries about psychology, many things that we can learn from modern psychology. But the depths of the mind, that India has gone far, far ahead of modern science. So there's the laws of physical nature, the laws of the mind, the laws of morality. Those are dealt with in the different spiritual traditions and religious traditions, and ethical systems. Even those who are non-religious have an ethical system, what is right and what is wrong. And so the laws of ethics, the laws of morality. And then there are the spiritual laws. And that Swami Vivekananda dealt with all of these, especially with spiritual laws, but he dealt with all of them. And so now I want to examine those somewhat. Swami Vivekananda said that there are two principles of knowledge, two principles operating in the acquisition or in the process of knowing. One is the referring the particular to the general. That may not mean much to you unless you've studied philosophy, but I'll explain it. Referring the particular to the general. I see something like this, and if I'm coming straight from the jungle and I've never lived in society, I have no idea what it is. Is it some strange-looking tree? Some strange-looking rock? What is it? But if I've lived in society, if I've visited society, then I recognize, first of all, that it's some sort of furniture. And then if I've been in auditoriums before, I know that it's a piece of furniture which is often found in auditoriums. And if I've been around enough, I know that it's a podium where someone stands to speak. A place where he can put notes if he has notes, a place where there's microphone, etc. And so I'm referring the particular. I see this strange-looking thing. Never in my life, until I came into this room, have I seen this particular thing. Never in my life. So how do I know what it is? Because I see this particular thing and I refer it to all of the pigeonholes in my mind, the categories in my mind, furniture, auditorium, furniture in an auditorium, a speaker's podium, and all of the things that I have experienced about speakers' podiums. Those are all behind the perception of this podium. If I've never been to a city before. And this has actually happened with people from tribes who had people who had been born and brought up in a tribal culture in a jungle or in a forest somewhere. Now you hardly find such people. You have to go to very remote places to find them. But 100 years ago it was common. Such a person would be brought into a city and they were completely confused. They had no categories for understanding what they were seeing. What is this? All of these huge things going up into the sky. There was no category for understanding. It just created confusion. And so all knowledge goes from relating a particular thing that we see, what class does it belong to? So Swami Vivekananda says, and it's true, if you think about it, it's true, that knowledge is nothing but classification. You know, in biology, that's quite well known, that in biology you relate a botanical or a zoological species to a kingdom, to a family, to a genus, to a species, etc. So it's categorization. But everything that we know because we relate it to a category. Those of you here, except for one or two, I had never seen before. Those of you students and professors I'd never seen before coming here. And yet, looking at you, I know that you're human beings. I relate you to the category of human beings. And I know that you're a man or you're a woman. I know that you're young or you're old or in the middle somewhere. How? Because I'm relating you to categories, and that's the way that we know. So that's one of the principles of knowledge. The other principle of knowledge is that the explanation of a thing is to be found within itself. And that's what makes a principle universal. That's what makes a principle universal. But let me go back for a moment before I come to that. Go back for a moment to this idea of classification, because that was important in Swami Vivekananda's thought. And it's the idea behind what I quoted a moment ago from the Mundaka Upanishad. Kasminnu bhagavo vijñāte sarvam idam vijñātam bhavatiti. What is that, O revered sir? By knowing which everything here becomes known. One of the things you find in the Upanishads is the extraordinary question, this extraordinary questions in the Upanishads. So this young man comes to a teacher and says, what is that, O revered sir, by knowing which everything here becomes known? That's a question that we can't even imagine until we come across it in the Upanishads, because we don't even know how to think like that. And yet at that early period of Indian history, a young man had that question. What is that by knowing which everything here becomes known? And the question to a modern mind, especially one that's not educated in Vedanta, this question itself sounds ridiculous. Well, there's nothing by knowing which everything. How can you know one thing that by which you're going to know how to speak Swahili and Chinese, and you're going to know where all of the planets in the universe are, and where all of the galaxies are, and how many galaxies there are, and how many grains of sand there are in the universe, all of that. Well, no, the question was not asking that. It was asking, what is that principle by knowing which everything here is seen as just an expression of it? And so in that sense, what is that one thing by which I can know everything? The essence of everything. So that points to this idea, again, that all knowledge is classification. All knowledge comes through classification, as Swamiji says. In fact, Swamiji says knowledge is classification. I know some of you as men, some of you as women, but all of you as human beings. And then I see you, and I see the deer on the path and other animals here on the campus, and I know that you're all members of the animal kingdom. And then I see plants and trees, and I know that those are parts of the plant kingdom, but the two kingdoms together become the universe of living beings, sentient beings. And then I put that together with rocks and asphalt and concrete and bricks and all of those non-living things, and we have all of the materials, all of the things in the universe. And so Vedanta sought to know that principle of which everything, living and non-living, everything in this universe is an expression. And the example was given, and Swami Vivekananda repeats it, of clay in the Chandogya Upanishad. You take clay. If you know clay, you know everything, the essence of everything made out of clay. If you see a clay elephant, you know, oh, that's a clay elephant. If you see a clay dog, oh, that's a clay dog. If you see a clay something that you don't know what it is, I don't know what form that is, but it's clay. I know it's clay. And so the Vedanta said that there's one thing out of which everything here is made, and that is consciousness itself. That everything in this universe is made out of that one existence, which is consciousness itself, which takes all of these forms, material and non-material, mental, physical, living, non-living. Everything is a manifestation of this one reality. And so Swamiji said that that is one of the principles of knowledge, and Vedanta teaches the highest generalization. Again, men, women, put together humans and animals, animal kingdom with plants, all the two kingdoms of living things, and then material things, the universe itself, and then the reality out of which all of this has come. So Vedanta teaches that highest generalization. And the other principle, Swamiji said, so one principle is the classification. The other principle of knowledge, when we're seeking principles, is the explanation of something must be sought within itself. The explanation of something must be sought within itself. So you find that that is what Swami Vivekananda emphasized coming from the Upanishads. That the explanation of something, and that's the basic principle of scientific knowledge. In scientific knowledge, you don't look at a lump of matter and say, who made this, who created it, how many days did it take the creator to create it, what's the story of its creation, and so forth, in what holy book is it told about who created this? No. The scientist looks at the lump of matter and begins to analyze it. It looks at the matter itself. It doesn't look outside and say, oh, who is the one, the great being or the great deity who created this lump of matter? No, it looks at the matter itself and begins to analyze it, take it apart, find its component parts, break the component parts down into smaller and smaller components until you come to molecules. Swami Vivekananda lived at a time when the idea of atoms and molecules was just in its infancy, still forming. And it's interesting to read some of his original lectures to see when he's talking about that, the infancy of what became great discoveries in the 20th century. You break down to molecules and you break the molecules into atoms. And what is the idea of an atom? Atom is the indivisible unit of matter. But they found that the atom is quite divisible. That's what nuclear technology is made of. You can divide it and make big explosions, make big things happen. So they went on breaking it down. And so science looks for science didn't get to the atoms and then say, well, who made these and how did he make them? No. You say, what is it? What is it? And so that's what the Vedanta did. It looked at the nature of things themselves, and that's what Swami Vivekananda taught. He taught, what is this universe? How did it come to be in terms of the universe itself, not in terms of somebody making it from outside, an extra universal creator. But how did the universe come into being in its own terms? So Swamiji was in tune with that. Another thing that made Swamiji's ideas universal, and then I'll get to the actual ideas, is that he taught religion in tune with the Vedas, the Vedanta, and of the yoga tradition, that religion is experiential and experimental, as science is. Science which is not experiential and science which is not experimental is no science. And so Swami Vivekananda wanted religion to be scientific in that sense, to look for the explanation of things within the things themselves. Who are you? Not who made you, but who are you? What is this and how does it come into being? Such questions rather than who made it. Again, looking for an outside deity who created things. And this idea of experimentation and experience. That if religion is true, it must be experiential. There has to be a way to experience it. As Swamiji said over and over, if there is a God, then I must see him or it. If there is a soul, I must see it. It must be experiential, and it must be experimental. There must be ways to find it. One of the greatest benefits I had in my spiritual life was when I had the opportunity long back, fairly early in my spiritual life, to associate with a great Swami who taught me the value of taking an experimental view of spiritual life. Many times in our spiritual life, we're going forward and we get to like a brick wall, and we don't find how to get through it. And so we just sit there doing the same thing over and over again, thinking that, well, someday it's going to break. And that's true. If you sit long enough, eventually it will, the obstacles in spiritual life. But he said, don't just sit there. Try to find, if you're trying to get through an actual wall, you try everything to get around it, to find out, you test it, you see what you can do with it, try how to get over it, under it, around it, break it down, whatever you can do. So in spiritual life also, he taught me that experimental attitude. Try to find what works. And that's what Swami Vivekananda did. That's part of the tradition and something that Swami Vivekananda emphasized. Experimentation, finding what works. In fact, Swamiji was so radical that he said in his rules for the order, he said that if in the future a teaching, a principle, an idea, a practice is discovered which is found to be helpful to people, then that can be accepted as Sri Ramakrishna's own. That is, he didn't limit, as religions tend to limit their discoveries to the founder. So the founder said these things and we have to stick to that, and nothing new is allowed to enter in. But he said, no, if you find anything beneficial, anything that works, again, that experimental and experiential nature. So another general principle that Swamiji, and then I'll come to specifics. A great teaching of Swamiji that hasn't been widely, the greatness of it has not been widely recognized. He said, always remember, and this was in tune with the Vedic tradition, always remember that we move from truth to truth, not from error to truth. Humanity moves from truth to truth, not from error to truth. What a tremendous teaching that is. What does it mean? It means that everyone is experiencing nothing but truth. You're looking at this universe from your standpoint. I'm looking from my standpoint. I see it somewhat differently from you because of my background, because of my mental tendencies and so forth, but each of us are looking at the same thing. Someone like Sigmund Freud, I may not be a Freudian. There may be certain ideas of Freud's that I disagree with, but Freud had a very brilliant mind, and he looked at the human condition, and he discovered things. I may not take his discoveries as final, but I take them seriously because he was looking at the human condition with a brilliant mind and he saw certain things. Yes, maybe there are better explanations, maybe there are certain things that he didn't understand, but what he was seeing was true as far as it went. I may not be a Marxist, for instance. I'm not speaking against or for Marx. I'm just saying that I personally may not be a Marxist, but Marx was a brilliant mind who looked at the universe, looked at the society, looked at economy, looked at human behavior, and he saw something, and he wrote about it. And so I can learn a great deal from him because what he saw was true as far as it went. I may think that he didn't go far enough, or I may think that his explanation missed something, but I have to take seriously what he said and learn something from it. So with everybody, the beggar on the street has their experience of reality. I can't deny it and say that, no, you're wrong. No, the beggar on the street has their view of reality, their view of the way the universe works. I can learn from them because we move from truth to truth, from lower truth maybe to higher truth, but from truth to truth. That means that everyone looking at the universe is seeing nothing but truth. There may be more expansive visions of truth, but everyone is seeing the same thing and trying to come to terms with it, trying to understand it. And so that idea of truth to truth, not error to truth, is a great principle which again allows us to grow towards universality. With that principle in hand, then I can learn from everyone everywhere, from the beggar on the street, from the person who's uneducated, illiterate, from the tribal, to a university professor, to anyone. Everyone has something to say to me. So, truth on different levels of experience, Swami Vivekananda. Let me come to that. Truth on different levels of experience and what Swami Vivekananda said about it. Again, in tune with this question, are his ideas really universal? With the laws of nature, Swami Vivekananda said in his wonderful lecture, Is Vedanta the Future Religion? He says, in my country, he was speaking in America, he says, in my country, India of course, in my country, people go down on their knees before a man who studies the Vedas, but they don't give a fig for someone studying physics. That is not Vedanta. The Swami says that is not Vedanta. With Vedanta, all knowledge is sacred. With Vedanta, all knowledge is sacred. So Swami Vivekananda saw in the search for truth of the scientist, or the search for beauty of the artist, the search for truth of the spiritual person, the search for goodness of the social activist or a servant of the people and of the nation. He saw the same basic urge, the same search for truth, because truth can express itself as beauty and as goodness. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. The great Greek civilization had exactly the same ideals. Truth, goodness, and beauty were the ideals expressed by the Greek civilization. They formulated the highest ideals of humanity as truth, goodness, and truth, beauty, and goodness. And here you have Satyam Shivam Sundaram, not borrowed but from the Greeks, the Indian indigenous idea. So Swamiji said that in all of these fields, the search is the same. So science, he didn't see as a threat to religion at all. In fact, he felt that science could help religion, that religion could get rid of many of its limited ideas through the help of a scientific attitude. And he wanted religion itself to become scientific. Scientific in the sense of experimental and experiential, looking for truth, not looking for story. Again, stories are wonderful. Stories are wonderful, and they can be used in any amount of stories for illustrating. But they illustrate a point. They illustrate a principle. If you don't know the principle and just know the story, you haven't really understood the story. And that was a great contribution of Swami Vivekananda to point that out. So he saw science and religion joining together eventually. You see the beginnings of it now, especially with some modern physicists who take an interest in spiritual things, and you see it in some other areas as well. But this idea of the coming together of science and religion, because both are seeking truth. One is looking outside and trying to analyze and find the fundamentals. What is this universe? What is the universe itself? How did it develop? And what are the particulars within the universe? And what are the relationships between the particulars? He felt that a time would come when physics would have to join with metaphysics, that physics would come to a point where it couldn't give a satisfactory explanation in its own terms, because everything here, if it's true, and Swami Vivekananda felt it was true, it was his experience and the experience of many sages, that if everything here is rooted in the infinite, beyond time, space, and causation, outside of the law of causation, then if you analyze everything here deeply enough, you come to a point where it begins to disappear into the infinite. And so at that point, he said, science and religion would come together, that the scientific search would become a spiritual search. And that you find the very beginnings of that happening now. Not loud and not clear, but you find the beginnings of it coming now. And then the laws of the mind. Swami Vivekananda taught Raja Yoga and the aphorisms, the sutras of Patanjali, the Patanjala Yoga Sutras, he taught them as dealing with the laws of the mind. Again, what you find in the Yoga Sutras is the amazing fact that at that early period, Patanjali, again, was not looking for stories. He was looking, what is the mind and how does it work? In its own terms. Again, that's how you find a universal principle. By looking at something and trying to find how is it that it works in its own terms. So studying the mind and finding the science of the mind. And Swami Vivekananda said that the sad thing you see looking through Indian history is, as far as the yoga goes, that the later the commentator on the Yoga Sutras, the more superstitious they became. But from the origins, it was a great science, and he wanted that scientific approach to Raja Yoga to be revived. Laws of morality. Laws of morality. That's something that's extremely important in the modern world. Why? because we've lost our reason for being good. Why should I be good? A Christian says, well, because the Bible tells me so. The Bible tells me don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't do this, don't do that. And so that's why I'm supposed to be good. And because in ancient times, Moses made an agreement with God that his people would follow that. Well, nowadays many people don't believe in the Bible. For those who do, fine. Let them follow that teaching. But many people don't believe in the Bible in the West. And so then if you don't believe in the Bible, you don't believe in Moses. Well, Moses had some agreement with God. What is that to me? Why do I care what agreement Moses made to God 3,000 years ago? What is that to me? I don't care what, I didn't sign it. Moses signed it. I didn't sign it. I'm not bound by that contract. That's what the Testament means, in Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament means that. It was like a promise to God, a contract with God that we will follow your law. But if I don't believe in all of that, then I'm not bound by anything. So why should I be good? In Islam, because God has told us how to behave. According to the Holy Quran and according to the Hadith, then God has told us how to behave. But if I'm not a Muslim, and that doesn't mean anything to me, so if I'm a Hindu, we have the Dharma Shastras which tell us how to behave. But if I'm not a Hindu, or if I'm born a Hindu but I don't believe in all of that stuff, then that means nothing to me. That's just old stuff, old people stuff. I don't care about that old stuff. So then why should I be good? So modern philosophers like utilitarians and humanitarians and so forth, those who believe in humanists, I should say, humanists and utilitarians and so forth, they try to come up with a basis for morality, like John Stuart Mill and Mills and others, said that we should work for the greatest good for the greatest number of people. As Swamiji said, why? Who cares for the greatest number of people? If I want to do what I want to do, I'll just go out and do it. Why should I worry about the welfare of the greatest number of people? If there's no God, if there's no soul, if there's no heaven and hell, if there's none of that, if I don't believe in all of that, then why should I care? And so one of the things that the modern world needs, it needed at the time of Swamiji, he saw it, and it needs still, is a universal basis for morality. And that Swamiji gave. It may take time, it will take time for the world to accept it, for the world to understand it, accept it not in the sense of blind faith, accept it because Swami Vivekananda said it, no. Accept it because we understand it, like we understand gravitation. We accept the principle of gravitation now because it works and it's been tested and is found to work. We accept the theory of relativity because it's been tested and we find that it works. And so with the theory of, or the principles of morality, Swamiji said that the basis of morality is the oneness of all existence, the oneness of all existence. Now that basis is a very high basis, not within the immediate experience of all of us, but it's available to the understanding of all of us, the rational understanding of all of us, that there is a unity of existence. At the physical level, there's one ocean of matter. I'm one whirlpool in the ocean of matter, you another. In the ocean of mind, my mind is one whirlpool in the ocean of mind, your mind is another whirlpool in the ocean of mind. Otherwise, we couldn't communicate with each other unless there were a connection of minds, unless there were a continuous ocean of minds. So there's an ocean of body, ocean of matter, ocean of mind, and behind all of that is the ocean of consciousness, of which everything is an expression. Once we understand that, then we see that whatever I do to another, I'm really doing to myself. Once I can understand, again in principle, not because somebody said it, but in principle, understand it rationally, that everything is connected, and anything that I do to you, it eventually comes back to me. Why? Not because the law of karma says so, just as some stated law that somebody made in an old book. No, but because of an actual principle which is functioning now, that I can see in my own life. I can see the functionings of karma, what's called karma, in my own life. Because when I do something to you, I find that it comes back to me. We don't see that oftentimes in life because our minds are confused. But if you practice prayer and meditation, if you clarify your mind, if you calm your mind, you begin to see, you actually see the connection between your actions and the experiences that come back to you. Then the law of karma is not just a theory, a nice explanation made for simple minds. You see, it's actually a principle. It's true. And it works because of the connection of all beings. Because I can't do anything to you without it reflecting back to me, because of the nature of existence itself. So the idea of morality that Swami Vivekananda gave was not believe this because I say it, not believe this because the books say it, not believe this because some great sage Manu said it, not believe this because Moses said it, not believe this because Muhammad said it, not believe it because Confucius said it, but because this is the way the universe works. It's the way the universe works. And each of us here, everybody has the potential to come to a deep understanding of karma, an experiential understanding. When the mind becomes a little calm, then we begin to see the connection between my actions and that which is reflected back. So the laws of morality. Why be good? Why be good? Because it's good to be good. What does that mean, it's good to be good? Swamiji said that was the great contribution of Buddha. Buddha said, don't be good because the Vedas say so. Don't be good because your parents told you to be good. Be good because good is its own reward. What that means is that goodness is its own reward. If I am good, then my own mind and my life improve. I find that my mind becomes clearer. My heart becomes unselfish. You have the beautiful words here, unselfishness is God. I don't know if that's your motto taken from Swamiji or what, but I see it there, I see it here. Unselfishness is God. Yes, that also is a principle. Don't be unselfish because Swami Vivekananda told you to be unselfish. Swamiji wasn't saying, I say be unselfish, therefore be unselfish, because I'm the prophet of God and I'm telling you what to do. No, unselfishness is God. It's a principle. When you become unselfish, then you find that you yourself have improved. When you follow moral principles, you find, if it's a genuine moral principles, there are many things that different religions, including even Hinduism, say are moral principles, which are just old superstitions. But if it's a genuine principle, if you follow it, you find that you become a better person. You become happier. The mind becomes more peaceful. The heart becomes pure. And so if you become unselfish, you find that you are coming closer and closer to God. By becoming unselfish, what happens? Why does Swamiji say be unselfish? Again, this pertains to morality, which we were talking about, as well as spirituality, where the two meet. By becoming unselfish, I expand. If everything is for me, everything is for this, then I contract, I become small. I become concerned only with my pleasure and with my pain. But if I become unselfish, I expand. Try sometime, if you're feeling sad and lonely and feeling cut off from life, just do something for somebody else, and immediately you feel connected. You feel connected to the larger life of the universe. And so by being unselfish, it doesn't mean I disappear. It means that all of this becomes part of what I think of as I. All of this becomes mine. Everything becomes part of the I. And so unselfishness is more paying, as Swamiji said, to motivate people with a somewhat selfish motive for being unselfish. Unselfishness is more paying. It makes you happier. It makes you more fulfilled. So eventually you have to get rid of even that to be really unselfish. If you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be unselfish so that I can be happier, then that itself is a selfish motive. But it's a good place to start, a good place to start. Try it, and you'll find that after a while you don't need to keep referring back to yourself and say, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to help this person because it's going to help me. No, you just want to help the other person. You just want to give to the other person. So laws of morality, and then laws of religion. Unity. Unity was at the basis of everything Swamiji said. The unity of all religions, the unity of the self, the unity of God, the unity of the soul, the unity of the whole universe. He said that unity is the one search of the human mind in all fields. It's a wonderful idea once you understand it. And it's, again, a rational idea. It's not true because Swami Vivekananda said it. He was pointing to a principle that in all knowledge we're seeking unity. In physics, what are you seeking? You're seeking the fewest and simplest ideas, the simplest equations, which can explain everything. The fewest number of forces to explain all of the different forces that we see in the universe. The fewest number of principles and the simplest principles. As one of the principles in modern science is simplicity and elegance. And elegance includes the idea of simplicity. That a theory, if there are two theories and one is more elegant and more simple, then the elegant and simple theory is more true than the more complicated. And so that search for unity. Einstein famously spent his last many years of his life looking for a unified field theory. Why? Because he felt that there must be one thing that unified the different five fundamental forces that we find in the universe, operating in the universe, like gravitation, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, etc. He thought that there must be one thing manifesting as these five, and he wanted to seek that. Some don't believe it's possible, and then maybe is, maybe isn't. But he was motivated by that search for unity. When we go to chemistry, what are we looking for? We're looking for the fewest number of elements to explain all of matter. But then once you find the element, the atoms, you break down the molecules and find atoms, you break those and find that, well, they're different atoms, but they're all made of electrons, protons, neutrons. And then they discovered other subatomic particles through the 20th century. And so they go on looking for what is the simplest manifestation out of which, or the simplest point of material creation out of which all of matter can come. And so everything is a search for unity. All knowledge is a search for unity, trying to find the fewest, simplest principles out of which the maximum can be explained. And so Vedanta says that there is one principle which explains everything. Again, not in detail. It doesn't explain why Swahili is different from Afrikaans, but it shows the principle out of which everything has come. And whenever you see something new, you see it as an expression of that one reality. And that is the self, the Atman, and that Atman is Brahman. And so this unity of existence, the end of all knowledge. So Swamiji said that all life is searching for Satchidananda. Everyone wants to be. Everyone wants to know. Even the person who doesn't want to go to school, the young boy who doesn't want to go to school, he also wants to know. He just doesn't want the discipline of sitting in a classroom. But it's not that he doesn't want to know. Everyone wants to be, everyone wants to know, and everyone wants to be happy. And that's what Satchidananda is. And so Swamiji said that there was one motivating force in all life, and that is the search for this existence, knowledge, and bliss. He said everything in the universe is motivated, in another standpoint, everything is motivated by love. The murderer kills because of love, a perverse form of love, wounded love or whatever. The murderer kills because of love. The thief steals because of love. The corrupt politician is corrupt because of love. And the saint seeks God out of love. But love is the one motivating force in the universe. So what do all of these things mean when we come down to our everyday life? It means that if I can see in terms of one motivating power, the motivating force behind everyone's actions here, then I can see a unity, and then I can understand. Then I can understand, oh, this is why the thief steals. This is why the murderer murders. We can't understand them by making them other and say, oh, these are a different type of people, they're bad, they're evil, and they should be destroyed. No. Society certainly should protect itself from those who seek to harm the innocent. I'm not saying that. But if we want to understand, we have to understand from the standpoint of the different manifestations of the same desire in the human heart. Then I can understand where people are coming from. And so the motivation of everyone is the same. So in conclusion, Swami Vivekananda also taught, again, particular truths. He taught truths that were for India. He taught things for America. He taught things with England in mind and with other countries as well. For instance, just as an example, about the Vedas. You find that when he is speaking in India to an Indian audience, he speaks, when he speaks of Vedas, he speaks of the Rig, Sama, Yajur, Atharva Veda, the Vedas as we know them. But in the larger world, when he speaks of the Veda, he says, by the Vedas, no books are meant. By the Vedas, we mean infinite knowledge, the principles on which all knowledge is founded, the principles on which this universe is founded. All of that is Veda. Veda is the repository of infinite knowledge. How can you put that within books, he says. Why did he make that difference? Because in the larger world, he knew that people don't care about the Vedas. I grew up in a country where you say, well, it's in the Vedas, and people says, well, who cares? I don't give a damn if it's in the Vedas. It doesn't mean anything to me. So then what are you going to say? Well, okay, then I can't talk to you? Well, no. He's taught Veda as a principle. The Veda is the repository of infinite knowledge. But when he was in India, he spoke of the Vedas in the traditional sense. Why? Because that was the foundation of Indian civilization. Here it does mean something to speak of the Vedas. It does mean something. And it was the foundation of civilization, that out of which the Indian civilization flowered. And so here it has a special context. So you find that he adapted his teachings according to the people and place that he was speaking of. Same with patriotism. I was so surprised when I first came to India in 1971 and found that to people here, Vivekananda is the great national patriot saint. And I came to understand it and appreciate it and love it. But when I first came, I couldn't understand it. To me, Swami Vivekananda wasn't the great patriotic Hindu saint who came to America and justified India and Hinduism. To me, he was the example of the illumined soul, the perfectly free, universal soul. That's what was meaningful to me. I hadn't grown up feeling the need for India's vindication in front of the West. Now I understand it, and now I appreciate it, and now I love it. But at that time, it meant nothing to me. So you see that Swamiji is different things to different people. He'll be different things at different times as well. But behind all of it are these universal principles. Well, what was it that was behind his universality? It was two things. One was captured in a statement of Sister Nivedita, his great Irish-English disciple. She said that with Swami Vivekananda, one had the sense that what he loved and what he wanted was truth and truth alone. That if he had found truth going elsewhere than Vedanta, he would have left Vedanta at a moment's notice and followed truth. He taught Vedanta only because that's where he found the best expression or the clearest expression of truth. He found it expressed everywhere. He even said, Swamiji said, and this is not from Nivedita, just my own words, or my own expansion of the idea. He said that I'm convinced that even the babbling of a baby is an attempt to express the highest truth. Even the babbling of a baby is an attempt to express the highest truth. So he saw it everywhere, but he saw the clearest expression of the truth which he had become identified with in the Vedanta. And so that's why he taught from a Vedantic standpoint, but not in contradiction to other traditions. But he saw that in the Vedanta was the clearest justification of other religions as well. And so he sought truth and truth alone, but he sought the clearest expression, and that expression which would include rather than exclude. And that's what he found in the Vedanta as well, a truth which would include rather than exclude. And then the highest basis for his universality was his vision of the oneness of reality, or the non-duality of reality. The oneness of truth, the oneness of being, the oneness of consciousness, the oneness of the whole universe, the oneness of all human beings, the oneness of human beings with all of the rest of the universe. So it was this profound unity, a unity so profound that even unity can't be said, non-duality. That was the basis of everything. And in that he found the justification for the harmony of religions, for morality, for the search of science, for everything, all of our human searches, all of the things that are dear to the human heart. He found them rooted in this non-dual reality. Found that all that we consider virtues, all that we consider true, all that we consider beautiful, all of it he found rooted in that. And that was the basis of his universality. I'll stop here.